I'm sure we've all had some dips in our journeys of faith. There have been times where I've strayed from God, when I've questioned and doubted Him, and I've needed the support of others. It's no different for our children. As we help them to find their own way in faith and to connect with God for themselves, a part of that process is going to be helping them to navigate their doubts and questions. This can feel daunting, but as we'll see, it's actually a natural part of their faith development. In this session, we'll be finding out some of the stages that our children go through as they grow spiritually, how we can create an environment where they feel comfortable sharing their thoughts and feelings. And we'll explore some different tools that we can use to help our children deal with their questions, even the weird and wonderful ones.
Hi, good. I just wanted to cover the business.
How old are you?
What do you do on the weekend?
Will Chelsea win the league?
Do you like Strictly?
When is it your birthday?
Will William ever stop annoying me?
How high is the world?
Good. Can you make me rich?
Will I do well in my tests?
Hi, good. Can you help us have more family trips? How do you create everything? And who created you?
What are you made from?
How do people get to heaven from their grave?
Do you have a daughter?
Thank you for making me. I don't have any questions.
As well as growing physically and emotionally, our children are developing spiritually. It's harder to spot, it's harder to measure, but as parents, we get the chance to influence it. Some helpful research by Dr. John Westerhoff identifies 4 stages of faith that our children may go through, and just knowing which stage they're at can help us encourage them in that journey. The first is experienced faith. This is our children's first exposure to Christianity. For children of Christian parents, they see living out our faith in this way as normal, as we read the Bible, as we pray, as we take them along to church. How our children experience faith in these early years can really shape our experience of God. And this stage is a vital one. As parents, we have more influence than we think. So when we ask our 6-year-old to hang up their coat for the 100th time, we might be forgiven for thinking that they don't listen to us. The truth is, they don't miss a thing. Nothing is lost. So they will see our actions, our reactions, our priorities, our attitude to church. All these things will influence their experience of faith. So if you have little ones now, pour into them all you can in these early years, because coming down the road is the next stage of affiliative faith. Now, affiliative faith is similar to experienced faith in that our children copy what they see going on around them. But this is where peer groups become all important. And this can be a daunting time for us as parents. Because until now, they think that we know more than Alexa, they think we're holier than the Pope. But now they're experiencing a wider group of friendship and other influences are coming in on their lives. Now, of course, we want our children to have a wide group of friendships, but in this stage, we can encourage them to form friendships with those that share faith. We can take them along to a church that has good children's work. We can go to summer camps and festivals that broaden their horizon, that give them new experiences. But it doesn't have to be all singing and all dancing. It could just be a small village church with 1 or 2 friends. Because when our children are having fun with others who know and love God as well, it helps them feel that they belong. Now, for the last 15 years, we have gone on holiday with the same 2 families for October half term. So 6 adults, 12 children, 3 dogs, a lot of chaos, a lot of noise, but loads of fun. We have watched box sets, we've jumped off rocks into the sea, we've gone on walks with children complaining that their legs were tired, we've taken over cafes and pubs. But those holidays have been really key in forming some friendships for our children that have shaped and helped them on their journey of faith. In fact, I remember one of the children going through a bit of a crisis of faith as a teenager. His parents had no idea, but it was a friendship and a conversation with one of the other children from the group that made a difference and helped him along the way. These friendships are precious and they form an important part of this stage of affiliative faith. And then the next stage is searching faith. So this is when our children are asking questions. They're trying to make sense of the faith that they have been taught. And it can be a scary time for us as parents. We're hardwired to protect our children. We want to wrap them in cotton wool. And the temptation can be, when they're asking questions, to jump in with neat, watertight answers rather than stepping back, allowing them to discover some things for themselves. Maybe sometimes admitting that we don't necessarily have all the answers. It's easier said than done, but a little bit like exercising a muscle, helping them think through these questions for themselves can actually serve to strengthen their faith. And this then leads on to the final stage of owned faith, when they come to have that personal faith, that owned faith for themselves. It may be that our children won't go through those stages in order. There may be overlap. And of course, there are no guarantees. But simply understanding what stage they're at can help us encourage them in their journey to finding a living faith of their own.
Lucas asks a lot of questions on a very regular basis. So questions about faith and life do come into the mix. He will sometimes say things like, oh, when God died, do you think that he was sad? Or like it would be quite an emotive kind of exploration about how God did this or why God does that. A lot of why questions, but they kind of often muddled into other questions. So we explore them when they come up, and they frequently do, and they're often like, why did God create flies? I don't like flies. So you have to kind of come up with some sort of answer to that.
Why do pandas have black and white? And why do little bees have little wings? And why do big bees have so much big wings?
What does heaven look like? And what does God look like?
They ask about heaven, about if, so-and-so will be in heaven, or how did they get to heaven?
Deep theological questions. How do you know there is a God? Tell me about that. I love it. They're young theologians.
But then in the next question, it'll be, something about football or the sky, it's total, and they just move on.
How his son died on the cross.
How God came alive.
Please, can you help us on our math?
How he managed to turn water into wine.
How the Trinity works, that I don't understand, and lots of things, why there's suffering in the world.
How old are you? Well, no, he's 2,000 years old.
Really?
Yeah, he is. God is 2,000 years old. No, that's Jesus.
He wrestles a lot with science and faith.
Well, I don't find it confusing because you know how, God's all magic-y and stuff. It's very confusing when, he splits up the Red Sea and he makes like 6 loaves of bread and 2 fish and like feeds like 1 million people. And then, And he brings a person back from the dead. And he brings himself back from the dead. And he brings some other people back from the dead. And he saves these people who were chucked in a big furnace.
Yeah.
Very rational person.
Yeah. Can you be a scientist and a Christian? And we can always say, your dad's a scientist and he's Christian, so that one's all right.
Yeah.
They do ask difficult questions about all sorts of things, about life in general. Why do people die? What happens when you die? How do you get there? What is the process that happens? All of those things. What about dinosaurs? Who created them first? And what about space? Oh my gosh, my daughter did ask me. Okay, so space. God, where is he? Is he above space, around space? I was like, because we want to know about galaxies, Mum. You know that there's galaxies and then there's the universe and then there's planets in the universe. And I'm going, I need to study. Ask your dad. Your dad will know.
I feel vulnerable at times because as they get older and because they do ask some quite deep questions where, again, like we said, they know when you don't know. So trying to pretend you know or you've got all the answers sorted when you don't, they see straight through us because they know us so well.
Some of the questions that they ask, it makes me realise the holes that I do have and that I have to reflect on and try and, fill those holes a bit for my own self so that I can tell them the answers,
I don't think I worry too much about not having all the answers because I think we don't always have all the answers, and that's part of having a faith as well, that you don't always have the answers, you don't know why God doesn't answer things, you don't know why things happen, and being able to manage that is kind of an important thing to learn. So sometimes I can say to them, I might go and talk to somebody else and find out a bit more for you, but I think I'm quite okay about saying actually sometimes I don't really know.
I don't think our children have quite reached the age when they ask very searching questions anyway. I don't know, do you think they do?
Sometimes they do.
Do they? Okay.
I don't think they know everything about God because there's a lot to know.
Sometimes we haven't got the answers, nobody's got the answers, and the questions the girls ask can be really, really difficult and really challenging to even think of an answer. And I like to think that we don't make up an answer just to try and satisfy them, but we really try and use the Bible as backup and to do research and see if we can get an answer for them.
My mum doesn't always have the answers, and that's a good thing because that means while we're learning, she's learning, and we'll all learn the same things.
I write down some of the great questions my children ask. Just this week we were eating cheesecake and my daughter said, "Daddy, is there ham cake as well? That would be really good." And there are certain questions they ask about the Christian faith. "Daddy, why do we say amen to God? Daddy, can we trust the Bible story is real and true? Daddy, why is it that God doesn't answer all of my prayers?" There are certain questions that we can answer in our stride. There are some questions which require us to go away and do some research. And there are some questions that are very difficult to answer because they touch upon some of the things that we still wrestle with. As my kids have got older and begun watching the news, these questions can become particularly real. They begin to see the true brokenness in the world. And they can ask these really difficult, awkward questions. And our response as parents can be to try and dismiss these questions. But the danger is that these questions get bottled up, that they fester. Instead, we need to really listen to our children. I find that as a parent, just in the everyday, I can too easily dismiss my kids. When they say, "Daddy, I'm hungry," I say, "You can't be hungry. We had tea an hour ago." Or, "Daddy, I don't want to go to dance class tonight. Hey, come on, it'll be great. Once you get there, you'll love it. Or, Daddy, my friends at school weren't very kind to me. Oh, you'll be okay. Cheer up. Tomorrow's a new day. But we need to stop to really listen to their questions, to put ourselves in their shoes. Because the danger is, if we fail to listen, if we just dismiss what they are saying, then as they grow up, they will stop coming to us. They will stop being honest with us. They will stop coming to us with their questions. My friend has a daughter who recently kept asking us some very interesting questions about the heart. Like, Mummy, what does my heart look like? Or, Mummy, how will my heart change as I get older? Or, a few days later, Mummy, will my heart one day get bad? My friend could easily have dismissed those questions, but instead she asked her daughter, what are all these questions about the heart for? And it turned out her daughter had heard these things in church about how they were praying for somebody who'd had a heart attack. And she'd also heard that Jesus lives in our hearts. And she had become very concerned that perhaps one day Jesus would no longer live in her heart. So my friend was able to explain to her what it really means to have a faith in Jesus. That he doesn't actually live in our physical hearts. There's a really important lesson there. That we need to be honest with our kids and open with our kids, to really listen to what is happening in their lives. That they can express their emotions and their feelings. That we can help give them a framework for how they understand who God is. And a framework to wrestle with difficult questions. We haven't always got to have all the answers. But as parents, we give our kids a launch pad for a faith that they can explore.
How to deal with doubts and questions. Doubts and questions are normal. Firstly, we can recognise that it's a very normal part of growing up for children to question their parents, and it's no different when it comes to faith. If our children have doubts and questions, this is a normal stage of faith and part of discovering what they personally believe for themselves. Try to listen before teaching. When our children raise doubts and questions, it's good to begin by listening and trying to understand what's behind their questions. It's good to ask ourselves, how are they feeling? What's prompted this? When we do this, we create a safe environment for them to talk openly and honestly with us. Talk openly. Allow them to talk openly about how they're feeling and what they believe. Our children may ask questions that we just don't know the answers to, and it's okay not to have all the answers. Involve others. Some questions our children raise might involve a bit of digging to discover the answers. We could use books, the internet, church leaders, children's workers and friends to help us.
When we go on this journey with our child, finding out answers together, we help them to own what they've learned and not simply believe it because we said so.
Session 1, take 1.
I think at different stages of their development, children wrestle with different things. So when your children are really young, they can't quite work out the difference between, is Jesus true in the same way that Father Christmas is true? Or, how do I differentiate between the idea of the tooth fairy and what the Bible has to say about, the angel Gabriel? So helping children understand that the story we're telling of the Bible is actually real. It's not just imaginary, it's not just a fairy tale, and it's real and true in a different way. I think as children grow up, they're often encountering alternative views at school, amongst their mates, kids that don't go to church, teachers that don't necessarily share faith. And helping the children to have a faith that isn't just given to them but received by them? How does it become their own faith that they actually believe in?
Sometimes kids feel disconnected from God, or feel like they don't know where he is, or that he's not talking to them, that he's distant. And one of the things that we can do to help is to facilitate them talking about that. Because sometimes we just think there's nowhere to go from that. They feel that God's far away and we say he's not, and then you're just stuck. And actually, a really good way is to say, what does it feel like? Does it feel like there's a wall between you and God? Does it feel like you're in a bubble? Does it feel like he doesn't care? Does it feel like you're so busy you can't find him? And there's so many different ways of describing it. And once you have something to describe it, then you can say, oh, that's really interesting. You know, why do you think there's a wall between you and God? Is that what the Bible says? Or, oh, let's just pray for God to pop that bubble, because there's nothing that can be between you and him. And it gives you a way forward to have a conversation. It's not going to fix it. It's not going to wipe it away, but it means that it lets them know that it's not the end. If you're feeling like God's far away, that's not just it. There's always a way forward, because God's always drawing us closer, and we can help them find that path.
Children are very worried about some of the world issues that they're hearing about in the news. They're also worried about some of the tests that they are facing at school and what their futures look like. And therefore, it's important for us to help children understand that with God, they do not need to be fearful. Another thing is body image, and unfortunately children are exposed to all sorts of media that tells them that they need to look a certain way, and many of them are struggling with who they really are. We know that they are being bullied. We know that they're searching online for resources to change the way that God made them into something that the world says they should be. And therefore, we can remind them that they are children of God. That is their identity. And alongside him, they don't need to be fearful of those things.
When our children ask us questions, it's often tempting to jump in with an answer or a solution. But I've played a lot of sport, and the best sports coaches I've come across are those who don't tell their athletes what to do, but help their athletes work out the answers for themselves. And we can do the same with our children. We don't have to tell them what to believe. We can help them work out the answers for themselves.
I remember studying the Bible with my 10 and 11-year-old boys, and we were working through the book of Acts, and it was all fine when it was the day of Pentecost and people were speaking in different languages and the Spirit was coming down. But we hit a bit of a road bump when we came to the story of Ananias and Sapphira, because here are two people that are struck down dead by God because they hadn't given all that they'd promised to give to God. And my 10-year-old was absolutely angry. This is completely wrong. It's completely unjust. This must be a mistake in the Bible, because how come God didn't strike down Pilate and he ordered the death of Jesus, but these guys didn't just give what they should have done in the collection plate and they're struck down dead? And, you know, I've studied a bit of theology, I've written a few books, but that question had me stumped. And I honestly had to say to the kids, you know what? I haven't got an on-the-spot answer for you right now, but I promise I'll go and find out. And it reminded me when I was a boy and I was struggling with my maths homework, it meant a lot to me that my dad, who hadn't done maths in a long time, got out his old textbooks and started looking them up for me. That really told me my dad cared about me, that he was willing to invest in my development, even if it meant a bit of work for him. And so I got all my books out, I phoned some friends, and I came up with the best answer that I could. And I think if our children can see that we don't have all the answers, but we're willing to put some effort in to try and find some answers for our children, that will speak volumes. And it might be you phone your pastor, it might be you Google search, it might be you drop me a line, because I've got a good answer to that question now. But whatever we do, I think if we take our children's questions seriously, that helps them to know we care about them and the Christian faith can stand up to the difficult questions.
We are parents, and our kids ask a lot of questions. And we can sometimes get worried about the God questions they're going to ask, because we can feel like we don't have enough theological knowledge, or what if they ask a really tricky one, and if we answer badly, will it ruin everything? I just want to say you're already doing a great job of answering questions, and God questions will come up, and here's an easy way to answer them with the knowledge you have just as you are right now. The first thing to do when they ask a question, I find, is to ask them what they think, because they have been thinking about this for a while. It's something's going on in their brain, and they ask, and just say, what do you think? It's really interesting to hear what you think, and let them talk and share about what's going on in their head right now. So the next thing you can then do is to say, well, this is what we know. And to the extent that you know something, share it. Whether it's from the Bible, from your experience, share what you know with them so that you're answering that question to the best of what we know. And if the answer to what you know is, I don't really know, that's okay too, because that's a truthful and authentic answer. The next thing to say is what you don't know. Sometimes we know some stuff, but not all of the stuff. And to say some things we don't know. These are the things I don't know about this question. It's really helpful to show them that it's okay to not know some stuff. And the fourth thing is what it means to me. As a parent, as an individual, how have I thought about this and processed it and made it part of my everyday life? So let's take an example. A classic kid question: where does God live? If you haven't had this question, you will probably have it at some point in your parenting. So the first thing to do is to say, what do you think? Your kid has lots of really interesting ideas, and just let them talk. Ask them, what do you think? Interesting. Where did that come from? And let them talk on and on about it. And then you can say, what do we know? Well, we know that God is everywhere. We know that he's in heaven. At the same time, he's here on earth listening to my thoughts and loving me. We know that he's inside of us, but we also know he's with the brokenhearted. It seems that God is everywhere. What I don't know is how he does that. I can't point to him and say he's in that one place. He somehow manages to be everywhere and still be God. It's amazing. And the fourth thing that we can say to our kid is, what does this mean to me? We could say, I love that I know that he can hear the tiniest thought in my head, but he also is with someone on the other side of the world. And whether I'm scared or whether I'm safe, he's there. And I find that so exciting. And then we can just have a conversation with our kid, going on from that about what it means for God to be here and there and everywhere. And you're in just a fun conversation about God.
The first thing is for us to be happy with not having all of the answers. We love our children so much that we really want them to be okay with everything, but that's not how life works. And so perhaps we need to be able to hold the questions and not have the answers ourselves. Years ago, my daughter was diagnosed with epilepsy, and when we returned from the hospital, we were just sitting watching television, and she turned to me and said, I thought you said God loved me. And I said, well, he does. And she said, yes, but if he loved me, why has he allowed me to have this illness? I didn't know. I still don't know. And in that moment, I had to hold the question with Holly. So I don't know the answer to that question, but I do know that he loves you, and I know that he has given you all these people around you that love you and will help you get through it. So I think if we are happy with some of those unanswered questions, then that will help our children settle with not necessarily getting all of the answers to all of the questions that they ask.
I think it's really helpful to create a culture within your family of not knowing the answers to the questions. There are so many things we don't know about God and about the Bible, and we can begin to wonder together about those things because we're curious. We love God. We love Scripture. It's so interesting to think about things that don't necessarily have right answers. Like, was Jesus more sporty or was he more artistic? Or, in the Old Testament, it says about how Moses talked to God as if he was talking to a friend. And they had this little tent where they did that. What do you think they talked about? Like, they just would go in for a chat. What did Moses and God chat about for so long? That was like two friends talking. I'm fascinated with stuff like that, but we don't know the answers to that. But the more we can just have ideas as a family and wonder together about things, the more not knowing the answers to the questions becomes okay, becomes a normal part of faith. There are some things we know, some things we don't know, but we turn our hearts towards God and wonder and curiosity together.
There was a time when I was dating a girl, and she was in Germany and I was in England, and this was way before there were mobile phones. And so what we had to do is we had to make a date via letter that she was going to be at a call box in Germany and I was going to be at a call box in England, and I would phone her. And one night we made a date like that, and I phoned the number and no one answered. And so I phoned again and no one answered. And again and again. I don't know how many times you would say was an appropriate time to dial the number, but I think 55 times and no answer. And I had no way of getting any more information. And all through my head, all these ideas were going, maybe she's gone off with a beautiful German man. They're so clean shaven and gorgeous. Maybe she's left me. But in order to help me get a proper perspective, I rehearsed everything I knew about this girl, our history together, how she treated people. And that gave me confidence to trust her even when I didn't have any more information, even when I didn't have any answers. And so when my kids ask me questions that I don't have brilliant answers for, the perennial question of why does God allow suffering? Why does bad things happen to good people and good things happen to bad people? Sometimes our answers are not enough. And I say to my kids, look, let's hold on to what you definitely do know about God. I know that God loves me because he let Jesus die on the cross for the sins of the world. That's a historical fact. That's not going anywhere. And because of that fact, I can trust him for the things I don't know about. I'm very glad to say that I did stay faithful to that girl that wasn't answering the phone. And next year's our 25th wedding anniversary.
In this session, we've heard about some great tools, tips, and ideas on how to answer questions. It's good to know that we don't have to have all the answers. There are often people in our church communities who can help with the more challenging questions, and there's lots of resources that can help us get started. Ultimately, as parents, we want to make it as easy as possible for our children to ask us questions and for us to explore the answers together. If we open these lines of communication while our children are still young, then they are far more likely to remain open when the bigger questions of life come into play as our children get older. Using the tools from this session, what can you do this week to encourage your children to ask questions and then find ways to explore those questions together?